Something dark in my daughter's room. I posted here about experiences I've had in the home where my wife and I lived after we got married. And I'm starting to wonder if there might be something else in the house we moved into. My daughter is a little over 4 years old. She's a generally happy child, though we struggle with ADHD and ODD. I also think there might be a mild case of autism, but they won't test her until she's 5. To my knowledge, she's never been abused, definitely not by me or my wife, or her grandparents. At about age 2 or 2.5, she started freaking out every night when we would put her to bed, and she does this to this day. We'll let her fall asleep in our bed or on the couch, then one of us will move her to her bed before we lay down. My daughter has trouble communicating sometimes, like if I say, "What did you do at school today?" She'll respond with, "I didn't kick or hit." It's like she has trouble understanding the question sometimes. So, previously, when asked, "Why don't you like your room?" she said, "I don't want my room, I want daddy's room," or mommy's room if my wife was talking to her. Anyways, now that she's older, I sat her down again and started trying to talk to her about it. Finally, I got a single statement that gave me goosebumps. I asked something along the lines of, "Is there something wrong with your room?" And she replied, "The bad man." And that's all she said. She went back to the "I don't want my room" spiel. I told my wife the next day what had happened, and she looked shocked. That's when she told me some history of the house. I knew the house had been built by her great-grandparents, both deceased now, about 50 to 60 years ago. Yeah, it's an older house. Her great-grandmother had lived there until being put into an assisted living home. She was still alive until right after we were married, so I had the pleasure of knowing her. Her great-grandfather, on the other hand, died long before we met, and apparently, he was a pretty awful guy. My wife informed me that he had sexually abused one of his daughters, my wife's great-aunt, in the house, and my daughter's room was a room that was hers. While I tend to sit on the side of skeptic, this information coupled with my daughter's bad man statement made me very worried. Hypothetically, if there was an evil or dark presence in our home or in her room, what can I do to get rid of it? I appreciate any help y'all might offer. An Edwardian child ghost. In the early 80s, I was a serving Metropolitan Police officer, serving with the Diplomatic Protection Group in central London. One summer's evening, at approximately 2 a.m., I was posted to a government building in Carlton House Terrace, SW1. This is a very old Victorian area of central London, near to St. James Park, which is gas-lit at night. I left the building by the front door to check the exterior, when I saw a small boy standing on the pavement in front of me. He was dressed in Edwardian clothing, of a brown tweed knickerbocker suit, dark brown long woolen socks, white shirt and tie. He was white, approximately 10 years of age, and he had short blonde hair, and he was carrying a leather football. I first thought that there must be a film crew nearby, as this area is used quite a lot by filmmakers, as very atmospheric. I said hi, but he did not reply, and just carried on bouncing the football. It was at that point I realized that something was very wrong. I could not hear the football strike the pavement. I also saw a woman standing some 15 yards behind the boy. She was also dressed in the style of a lady of the Edwardian era. She beckoned with her hand for the boy to come to her. He smiled at me and waved and ran towards the lady. It was at this point they both vanished. My dad fired at the devil. There has always been a little ongoing joke within my family about the time my dad stood a few yards away from the devil and shot at him. It's always been one of these little jokes that get mentioned once in a blue moon. I can remember as a kid, if I was ill or hurt, or anything like that, he'd mention it. The point is, I never really got a good explanation for it, except the off-the-cuff remarks about it. I mean, I've never believed in anything paranormal. I like ghost films, etc., but I've never really bought into the whole idea, you know? Anyways, a few years ago, the whole family and friends were over celebrating New Year's. As the party was dying down, for some reason or another, it got to people telling paranormal experiences in life. It was the first time I really heard the full story about the devil incident. This happened back in 1982. I was only a baby back then, so I have no memory of it. We live in a small town in Scotland called Blackburn, which is famous and infamous now for Susan Boyle. Anyways, back then, my parents were not long married and had their first home, a little bottom-floor flat in a street called Rowan Street. It's a dump now, and I bet it was a dump back then, too. Anyways, so the story goes that my dad was working pretty late one night. It was just me and my mother in the flat, and my dad comes home late in the evening, eating his dinner, and then our dog starts going nuts, barking at the kitchen door, real aggressive, frantic barking at something outside. This was strange for our dog Sinbad, as he was one of those dogs that never barked and was actually a good-natured dog. He died when I was 9 years old, so I have a good memory of his characteristics. So the fear was that there was an intruder in the back garden. My dad reasoned this. So, as quickly as he could, he quickly ran into his bedroom and got out his .2.2 air rifle. Hey, it's Scotland, not America, you know. So, he ran back into the kitchen, the dog still going nuts, barking and scratching at the door. Air rifle over the shoulder and a torch in hand, he opened the door to the garden. The dog ran down the steps, stopping at the pavement, still going nuts. My dad stepped down too, scanning the area, seeing nothing, until he looked where the dog was barking at. Now, what he described to me is the stuff of nightmares. Basically, he looked across the garden, and what he saw, he described as a black moving form of mist like floating smoke, blacker than the blackest black, with glowing red eyes moving from left to right across the garden. Raising his torch to it only illuminated it against the night and made its features stand out even more. A smoky black form, those red eyes burning. So, he went into soldier mode. He was in the territorial army back then. He raised his rifle and began firing at this thing. I still find the idea of shooting at this thing with air rifle pellets funny, but God, that had been me. I'd been running in the opposite direction, you know? It was around that time, telling the story, that my mother chimed in, mentioning that she too had witnessed this thing from the kitchen window, and she too watched it pass into the brick wall separating the gardens. I had always assumed it was only my dad that saw this thing, but I got the impression that neither of them were really keen to dwell upon those memories. The logic was that way back in '82, the upstairs neighbor was a guy known to be into weird stuff like Ouija boards and like. So naturally, we think there was a connection. I know they moved away from there not too long after that, and in my job now as a postman, I've been to that block of flats and even saw the garden itself. Also, the morning after the event, my dad checked back fence and found no pellet marks, so he shot and hit the devil, or a rather large cat. Well, that's my story. Any ideas to what that was? Demons are real. This is undoubtedly the most terrifying experience that I've ever encountered in my life thus far. I was 8 or 9 at the time, and staying with my sister and my 2 cousins, 1 girl and 1 boy, at our grandparents' house. They live in the desert in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, but we spent almost every weekend all together at their house. I have never had anything happen there until this experience. The 4 of us decided to sleep over in the living room, as there was more space for all of us to lay. The living room was small, but still managed to fit 2 long couches and 2 love seat type armchairs. My sister and boy cousin slept on 2 of the long couches, and my other cousin and myself rolled out blankets and slept on the floor in front of the freestanding wood stove. We snuggled up, and the soft glow of the dim lamp allowed us to drift into peaceful sleep. Suddenly, my eyes shot open in the lightly lit room for some reason. I didn't hesitate waking up, but I hadn't heard anything that would have startled me. Everything was completely silent. How long had I been sleeping? It felt like a few hours at least, though my adrenaline wasn't helping indicate how much rest I'd received. My body and mind was on all systems go mode, and it was a surreal feeling. I never felt this kind of way ever before at my young age. My cousins and I were laying on our sides, and I was facing her back. Seeing her long black hair reassured me that maybe everything was alright. Maybe no one else had woken up out of the fear. But that's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye. To my disbelief, something was in this room with us. One of the armchairs sat next to one of the couches, and a few feet in front of where my cousin's feet lay, there was a dark silhouette, a male figure sitting in the chair, not just normally sitting in it, no. His legs were pulled up to his chest, and he was sitting in the chair sideways, his back leaning against one of the armrests. I slowly moved my gaze around the figure, not moving my head nor body at all, only my eyes. I heard my pounding heart in my ears, and felt my stomach flipping over itself violently. He was facing away and looking down, as if he was watching my other cousin sleep on the couch. He was extremely lean and had straggly shoulder-length hair. There were multiple solutions my mind thought of to try to rationalize why this man was there. They raced through my head almost simultaneously. The first, he's a home intruder. Wait, we were in the middle of nowhere. No one lives around here. And wouldn't he be stealing stuff or trying to kill us? If he broke into the house, okay, not a burglary. That's it. Just a shadow, and my mind is playing tricks on me, right? No, it can't be. He's sitting in front of the lamp, and I can't see any light through him. No way a shadow blocks out all light, and I can see real features like his hair and arms. Last, it's sort of dumb, I know, but it crossed my mind that he might be Jesus. My parents never forced us to be religious, but we were taught certain aspects of Christianity and were encouraged to say the Lord's Prayer. I felt a sense of calmness rush over me at the thought of this being Jesus, and honestly, I only thought that because his long hair reminded me of all the depictions of pictures of Jesus I had seen. Now, as quickly as the calmness filled my body, it was disturbingly torn away from me. Right when the thought that this may be Jesus crossed my mind, this thing got up. It got up in such a strange manner, though. If any of you have played The Sims before, you know how weird the avatars move? Like to sit, the avatar will walk up to the chair, turn to one side, then turn again, then sit. That is the only way I've ever been able to describe how this thing moved. In that sort of broken, unnatural pattern. It stood up, still facing away, then turned and faced forward, then turned around so it was facing me, and then sat in the same position as before. Its legs brought up to its chest, and its arms wrapped around its knees. I was utterly terrified. My cousin was less than a foot away, though. I tried getting her attention. I think I managed to whimper her name quietly 2 times, until I was too afraid to keep trying. I didn't have the slightest clue what to do. I contemplated running for my grandparents' room, but it would require running past this thing. I was in complete fear of my life and soul that I didn't want it to catch me. I contemplated just screaming and trying to get my sister and cousin's attention, but I kid you not, the only thing I thought was, they're already dead. For some reason, That's the thought that was put into my mind, that they were already all dead, and I was the last one that would be killed by this thing. As I was having an internal meltdown, and fearing the eternal damnation of my soul, this thing begins to run its hands up and down its calves. But not just that, its nails were scratching at its skin, and I can still remember the exact sound of its nails scraping against its flesh. Recalling it brings tears to my eyes, and I don't think I'll be ever able to forget that moment. As it was scratching itself, it was still watching me. Though I couldn't make out exact facial features, its head was positioned down as if it were looking at me, and I could definitely feel it. I don't know how long this went on for. Time was so warped and messed up, I still can't figure out how long this encounter occurred. As he continued to scratch, I heard the squeak of the rocking armchair behind me. The noise you'd hear when someone stands up out of those old chairs, out of them. The exact thought that went through my mind was, you've got to be fucking kidding me, there's two of these things? I remember at that moment, I stopped my breathing. I internally tried to meditate and calm myself, thinking that these entities are feeding off my fear. I remember telling myself to slow my heart rate, and eventually, actually, at that moment, I accepted my fate. Then, I felt the thing lay down behind me, as if it were spooning me. I never felt it touch me, but I felt the blankets behind me move. The biggest chill ran down my spine, as I heard one elongated breath in my ear. Not only did I hear it, I felt my hair be brushed across my cheek as the hair hit it. At this point, I was over it. All I could think to do was say the Lord's Prayer, so I quickly joined my hands together and mentally recited the words, which I had always brushed off and joked about before. And then I was out. I don't remember anything except waking up to daylight the next morning. I jumped up, looked around the living room, and instantly became an emotional pile of goo. I woke my sister and cousins and told them everything, and was so thankful that they were okay. I considered multiple theories about what could have happened that night, though shadow people and sleep paralysis would be a possible theory. I don't believe that's what happened. I could still speak, I could still move, and I haven't had reoccurring experiences, like many people with these sleep paralysis encounters. I honestly believe I came into contact with demons that night, and just for reference, my parents did educate me a little on religion, but I was never told of demons before I experienced this. Though I don't belong to an organized religion today, I do believe that there are good and evil entities out there. The last few years, I have stopped trying to block this experience from my memory, and I have accepted it, and it's made me want to research and study more on demonology. With my findings, you have to willingly allow demonic presences in your life and accept it. I believe they were demons because of how they reacted to the thought of Jesus and me saying the prayer. I also believe I was at the age where they were trying to afflict me and move into my life. Whatever really happened that night, though, I am forever thankful for the love and light for protecting me and my family, and I am proud of myself for being strong enough not to accept them in. Edit. I asked my cousin about this a few days ago. I wanted to see what she remembered from the night, or if she even remembered it ever happening to me. When I asked her to recall what she remembers, she claims that she heard me call her name in the middle of the night, but she fell right back asleep. After waking up from my voice, she'll remember bits and pieces of the rest of what I told them in the morning. This debunks the theories of me just asleep, since she witnessed me speaking to her during the encounter, but demons, shadow people, aliens, and other cryptids are still up for grabs, I have also stopped reading and responding to the comments left on this post. If you have any questions, research, or encounters you'd like to share with me, please send me a private message. This just happened during my shift. So, thank you for your condolences. I truly am grateful for them. I hope for the few that obviously do not understand what it feels like to lose someone, that you won't have to experience it. And if, or when you do, that you're able to find support in those dark times. I've heard from the guy who does night shift that he also heard the same noise I did late the other night. He told me that he used to stand outside with the deceased and smoke a cigarette. Where'd he do that same bug noise beside his ear? He heard it outside and they'd stand together. His service is next weekend, so it will be good closure for everyone, I think. Again, thank you guys so much. This past Monday night, my coworker committed suicide. I came the morning after and lit a candle for him. He was the first to miss the office to not only help me get my bearings for the job, but welcome me as a friend. We went to breakfast and would just mess around during our shifts. It was almost like I was a kid sister or something. One of the things he'd do to bug me was rub his index finger and his thumb together to make a vibrating noise that would sound like a bee. He'd do it right next to my ear, so that tickle and I jumped back. I decided to check out the new break room that was built for us today. I lounged on the new couch for a minute next to the lamp we had, and we were going to memorialize it for him with a plaque, you know. And as I was walking through the hall to leave the break room to get back to work, bzzz, my ear tickled and I stopped. I walked back through the hall to see if maybe some new thing in the wall was making noise or something like that, since the room was just built. But I could not find the sound again. Besides that, the feeling was right next to my ear, like he used to do. I'm not sure if it was him or not, but if it is, I hope it means he's in a good place. Rest in peace, bud.